Well, it's 5:30 and I will open up tonight's retreat. The date is November 18th, 2020, and the time is 5:30. I'd welcome anyone who's joining us remotely. Our retreats are more informal opportunities for us as a board to get together and do some board development, have some of those less formal conversations than the ones we have in our regular board meetings. So thanks to everyone who's decided to join us. Our first agenda item is board members as ambassadors. And I will turn it over to Scott Hume and Leslie Chester, who have been working with Dr. Battle on this part of our work. Scott and Leslie.
All right. So Leslie and I have had a couple of meetings over the course of the last few, since the start of the summer, about this particular board goal. We met with Dr. Battle, we met with Aaron, I think 2 or 3 times, I forget. But regardless, the document that was shared in the background papers is kind of the outcome of that, which it looks like is being shared now. What we talked about was exactly what does it mean to have board members as ambassadors and how would we measure that. So what I thought we could do this evening, and Leslie, feel free to jump in at any time if and when you need to, but we would just walk through the document and then collect any input or feedback if anyone has any, or if there are any questions that anyone has about what we have put together. So how we defined this ambassadors piece was that it would include things like supporting the district's messaging, answering questions we get from community members, or directing them to the appropriate staff or to the board chair, presenting information and attending promotional events whenever possible, understanding and reinforcing the district's brand, using any social media platforms we may have to amplify district messages, and then visiting schools as assigned and sharing our experiences at board meetings once we were able to visit schools again. So that was how we defined this particular goal. And then we have below some of the measures of progress that we came up with. So things like tracking the number of school visits that board members make to their assigned schools. How are we using our social media accounts to promote the good things that are happening in the district, or promote the things that are happening in the district. And then also just tracking the number of community events that board members attend. I think an ambassador we thought was kind of hard to come up with measurable things. So these are the things that we felt we can say we did X number of visits to schools, or X number of community events, or those sorts of things. Those are things that are pretty easy to track and to measure. So that's what we came up with. Leslie, do you have anything you want to add?
No, you covered everything that we've discussed really well. I think, these measures, I think, we thought made the most sense. And then, like, even with social media, if we even self-reported on our accounts how many people maybe followed or liked our extension of the post, I mean, that could be a measure too, but that's maybe a little more detail that we maybe strive for later. But I think starting with these would be good.
So are there any questions, comments, feedback? Abigail has something, it looks like. Oh, but you're muted.
Dee Dee was going before me.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Dee Dee, I didn't see.
For clarification, should we just kind of chat, or should we raise our hand, or how would you like us to do that, Abigail?
Well, I think Scott and Leslie are leading the conversation, so I think
So
if
it
you
could be
if you want to-
relatively informal.
it's relatively
Yeah, I think we're
think
informal. I
it's-
think
yeah.
just chime in.
If all three of you want to talk at once, we'll corral
You'll
you somehow. But
Oh, I think this adds nice clarity to some things we've tried to do in the past, but this really sets forth what it's like as a board member in our duty to schools and the community. So I think you've done a fine job clarifying what we need to do, not just as the ambassadors, but as the role out in the community. So congratulations on putting this together so succinctly. So
that's always my goal. So thank you. The shorter and more succinct, the better.
yeah, so what truly has been tough is the pandemic in terms of trying to connect with the schools. I know I've tried. I don't want to be a liability to the schools. I don't want to be a distraction to the schools. So I've pretty much not connected with schools because I don't want to be a distraction. There's plenty on their plate now. So
Same here. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. This is a really great write-up, and we'll have to, I'm making a note to add the ambassadors write-up once it's finalized to the packet of information that new board members will receive, because I think this is really like more towards the front of that packet of information. It's kind of clear. The only question I had was, because I actually did continue to meet with the principal at my school. Does it necessarily need to be in person? Like, couldn't we still continue to connect? And Dee Dee, I agree, your cautionary note about not wanting to be a distraction. And certainly, we could work with Teresa and Brian to help principals understand that this is, we're with the best of intent. We want to, for those who are able, connect with our principals remotely, but certainly if they don't have time, then they should feel free to say, I'm sorry, I can't meet for the next month or so.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I haven't been doing that, but you're right. I don't think there's anything preventing us from doing that until we can actually, hopefully someday, get into the schools again.
Yeah, because really getting into the schools is the fun part.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so I guess
especially with the events at the schools, or if there's like assemblies or activities, that's nice being able to have our presence there once we when we get through this pandemic to do that. I mean, I think that's why I've been hesitant to, I've talked to both of my kids' principals, but I haven't actually done that with the assigned school I have yet. But yeah, I could certainly still do that in a virtual setting. It's just still different because it's more like just checking in with the principal versus engaging with the school community.
And I think maybe, if we could make some sort of note to that effect, making like, and of course, Teresa, you can work with Brian and help, let the principals know that we don't want to be a distraction, but we are interested in hearing, how things are going, at least from the principal, if we're not able to connect with the larger school community at the same time.
Absolutely.
what's the next step with
Have any-
this? document, I mean, do we need to approve it as a board?
Well, I know this was related to our strategic goals as a board. This was one of the goals we set out as a board to do that Scott and I were assigned to. And so this is a part of it. So I don't know what the formal next step is, but this aligns with
I was wondering.
our plan. I didn't hear what you had to say, Scott. You kind of cut out.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, my Wi-Fi was being a little wonky there for a minute. I was just going to actually say that I was wondering the same as Dee Dee as far as the next steps. So that's what I was trying to say when my internet went out.
I think it's up to us if we want to receive it as a report in a regular board meeting. That might be a good way to review it publicly. We certainly could take action on it, but it's really up to us how we want to receive it. I would suggest it as a report, but
I like that would be fine. I like the idea that it would have a more formal review so the public knows. The more I think about it, I like that idea as a report, because then it gives flexibility. So if we want to tweak it or do something with it, we have that flexibility as a board to do that, especially we're still in this pandemic. So
that can be reviewed annually as just part of our regular work.
Right.
Sure. Well, what I can do is I'll tweak that one sentence to say something about visiting schools or having conversations with principals as appropriate. And then we can share out the final version in a report at an upcoming meeting, I guess.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thank you. All right. Next. Moving on to a discussion about committee, school, and board member assignments. This is just kind of a general review of what we currently have, what we don't have, and where do we want to land before January, before those assignments come up again. So first, discussing the Hall of Fame board assignment. The question is this, it typically has been a board assignment. I think it's kind of been something that we've just automatically, pushed forward as an assignment, and I wanted to just bring it forward for consideration as to whether it should remain an assignment or if it could be, something that either a board member or community members could volunteer for.
Abigail, here's a little history on that. When the Hall of Fame started 10 or 12 years ago, when the high school turned 50, was when the Hall of Fame was begun. And they drew up the bylaws. Vicki Roy was on the school board at that time. They put in language that a board member needed to be on it. Well, that's difficult because really things need to move the other way. In other words, the board has, for want of another term, the power threshold. The Hall of Fame committee doesn't. So in other words, and I double checked today, that language is still in there, that the committee consists of a board member and the principal of Burnsville High School. So I'll stay on that committee, and we'll have to tweak that language in their bylaws, because really, if there would ever be a legal challenge on it, it would fall apart. So just know though that that's in that language. That language needs to be more flexible, where it may include a board member, something like that. anyway, I did check that today. I've been on that committee a long time, and I think I started out as a principal on that committee. And Vicki Roy started out as a board member on that committee. I think that's how that unfolded. And then as I ran for the board, both Vicki and I, well, then Vicki didn't run for the boards, but she had been on the committee a long time. So they've, for its entire existence, has had a board member on it. So I will work to get that language changed to where so we don't run into any legal stuff. But I know Dan Luth was interested in being a part of that. So as a board, you know, that's discussions you may want to have in the future. Do you want to be part of that Hall of Fame? It has had a long history with the school board. So anyway, that's historical perspective for you.
Thank you, Dee Dee.
What's the technical status of the committee? Is it a subcommittee of the board, or is it a?
No, it's I looked that up today. No, it's focused on the high school, and the people who are put in the Hall of Fame. There's categories. One is high school graduates, and they must have graduated 10 years. They have to have been out of the high school for 10 years. The other ones can be staff members who have retired out of the high school or been out of the high school for quite a few years. Then there's the community member category. What I can do, in fact, I could pull it up and send it to you now, is send you
What I'm asking is, so it was created by an action of the board. Am I hearing that correct?
No,
No,
it's its own separate entity. It's probably its own 501c3 if it has an organization.
Okay. So we don't really have any. So what we don't have a direct control over it. We just have a seat at the table, basically.
right.
What so what do the bylaws state about change of the bylaws? That would be the question I'd have. How do you go about getting the bylaws changed? Is it very challenging? Because I guess what potentially we'd want to consider.
I think it's by the actual committee.
Just okay. So I guess what we'd want to maybe consider is just having that phrasing changed to there's a seat that is a board member seat or a designated representative of the board. Just add that language in so that then we have the capacity to put somebody in that position that may not be an active sitting member of the board.
Right.
To represent
It could be may. The language could be may.
I was going to say may because it allows flexibility. So if we don't have the capacity to have a member on the board for that year, we're not obliged to or required or a must to do it.
Yeah, that's understandable. I don't want to. Yeah, may's fine. I mean, I think we should. That'd be fine. Yeah. And then, so we don't have any kind of. How do they make the determination? What if the scenario developed that there was somebody proposed that we didn't think was in the best interest of the district to have sitting in, becoming I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying, what if that did happen? What would be the recourse the board would have to stop that from happening?
I think it's pretty much done by that committee.
Okay.
The only power would be if
that one vote.
The single vote. Yeah.
Yeah. That's already the way it is. So,
Right.
Okay. I didn't want to forego that if that was something we had in place, but that's fine. Okay. No, I think if we just change that language, then we have the flexibility to I don't know that would have, like we said, if there's somebody that does have a passion and interest in it, that's fine. If they happen to be a sitting board member, that's great. If not, then we can, allow that to be a designate of the board. But would that get changed in the bylaws of the organization?
And I think my personal concern was just bandwidth of board members that,
Right.
It's nice to have somebody there. It's, they provide a great feature and a highlight of all the great things that, our graduates have done since they've graduated. But, to have it be an actual board assignment when there might be other assignments that we really need to dedicate our time to, it's hard to have that being a hard and fast rule.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the direction of you really can't have outside committees or agencies tell us what to do.
Yeah.
So
Dee Dee, you'll work with them to change that language?
yeah,
Okay.
I will.
All right. So basically where we are, so when do they meet next, Dee Dee?
Well, we haven't, and because typically, I won't go through all the history, but typically they're selected and we have the ceremony at a football game, the Hall of Fame football game. Well, we didn't do that this year. So, and we haven't decided as a group whether we're not going to, if we're going to select for 2020 and then celebrate 2020 and 2021 at the 2021 football game. None of that's been decided. We haven't met. And
so would it be possible for them to call a meeting before our organizational meeting? So at least, I don't want to be in conflict with them when we reach our organizational meeting about whether we must be there or not, because they're requiring it as part of their bylaws.
Abigail, I don't think that'll be possible because many members, not many, but several of the members of the committee are, well.
We're virtual, Dee Dee.
Yeah, virtual. I'll try to get back to you on that. There's been almost no communication between and among us. So let me work on that and I'll get back to you.
Awesome, thank you. All right. School assignments. This just is coming up as a check-in. How do we feel about school assignments? Are we good with how they're structured? Conversation about if there are any changes that we want to make or if we're good where we are.
I'm personally challenged with school assignments because of the demand of the schools my two kids go to on top of the other responsibilities that we have as school board members. So I've been not a model participant and I'm not sure how to go about that because I don't want to assign myself to something and then lack the follow through or the ability to follow through. And so I'm not sure. I love the idea. I just wish I had the capacity, I think.
Anyone else?
I think I already said my bit during the previous discussion that as much as I mean, just with COVID, it just hasn't happened for me this year. I still think it's a wonderful idea and I would like to see us continue it. But I think until the situation with COVID improves, I don't know that it's going to be much different than what it is now for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
And the most enjoyable part of doing that is going to events at schools, which obviously aren't happening right now. So that makes it hard. And I think it's important for us to be seen at some of those events and to be visible. So I'd like us to keep doing it, but with the hope that COVID is better soon.
Kind of an aspirational goal for ourselves.
Yes, good phrase.
Dee Dee or Eric, do you have any comments?
Well, I appreciate and respect individual constraints, but I do think the existing model is fairly functional as for the whole. One thing I would comment about attending events, it just popped in my head as you said that, Scott. Eagle Ridge, Erica had a monthly meeting the other night. It was a virtual. It was a parent meeting. It would normally be in the lunchroom, whatever. Tables. It was a virtual deal. My child attends there, so I had notification it was occurring. So I was going to go. I emailed her and said, "Look, I'm going to be there. I'll be there as a parent. I'll wear the board hat too if you'd like. You can let people know I'm there." She was going to have some discussion time around how things are going and learning lessons and things around the virtual and hybrid world. So she broke people out into breakout rooms, as you can do in Zoom. And then she just dropped me in. I would go in and I'd pop back out. She'd put me in another one. And they knew I was there. I was just listening and, observing and not speaking, obviously, just listening in. So no different than it would be if they were having a meeting and sitting around round tables in the lunchroom and you were just wandering from table to table, listening to people. So there is some capacity in this virtual world, is what I'm saying, for us to attend things. Of course, the principals at your designated buildings would need to know that you're interested in doing that. So we would have to reach out and make that connection.
That's a good point, Eric. I think making it clear to principals which of us are available for those kinds of things and whether we are or aren't probably would make it easier for them too.
From the historical perspective, in the years I was a principal, I can only think of maybe 1 or 2 years. Now, I was a principal for like 21 years. There was only 1 or 2 years that the district did that. And the perspective was not to show favoritism, that kind of notion. But I think it gives board members a chance to connect with and get to know a building a little bit better and connect with the site administrators. So having served as a site administrator and served as a board member, I think there's reason to continue the practice. So once the pandemic, once you can maybe formalize it a little bit, it also means as a board member, when activities happen, you can go not just to your child's program, but you have an opportunity to get familiar with programs in other buildings. So I think it's a good idea.
Well, and for me, I personally prefer to be a board member in schools other than my own kids' school because I don't want to confuse the staff and the principals. Right. I just, want people to know that when I'm in my child's school, I'm a parent. And when I'm in another school, I'm very clearly a board member and just out of respect for them. So I'm hearing, although we have some Venn diagrams going on, I think overall we support the school assignment model and we know that each of us will do our best with where we are right now with the pandemic and moving forward with personal work schedules and family schedules. And, no judgment, Leslie, I don't think you should feel bad that, you've only been able to support your kids at their schools. I mean, you have to be a parent first too, right? And we do the best we can with connecting as board members in the schools. So, okay, good. Thank you. That was really helpful, everybody. All right, SPA committee. Question as to whether we like SPA as a committee of the whole with workshops, or are we considering possibly making it a committee again?
I like it as a committee of the whole, but at the same time, in some of the workshops, I may not necessarily know intuitively that that's what the purpose is. Like to like call out, this is the committee of the whole spa workshop. Like, okay.
And that's probably on me. I think we need to do a better job of identifying the presentation, and also trying to make sure that the format of the presentations are more like a committee setting where there's conversation and less just, one-way conversation with the questions at the end.
I had the same question, so yeah, I think that's good. That will be a helpful clarification moving forward.
Yeah, I would say that I am still very favorable of the concept of what we came, of the committee of the whole and what the intent was. I think just given the COVID environment and the excess of the other stuff that we've had on our plate, so no judgment here, but we have had less. I mean, the year I spent on SPA as a regular committee, there was a lot of data I looked at and a lot of topics that were discussed that just I have not seen this year as a SPA committee of the whole. So I guess part of me is a little reserved to make any kind of judgment call, because I think we still need to give the concept a try. We just haven't had an opportunity to do very much with it.
And I think also the fact that Teresa is working with her team to create a dashboard, that, I think that will lend itself to a lot of these conversations, and might even allow us to get away from the prepared slide deck where we're kind of looking at the dashboard and, staff comes to the board and with, a topic, and we all know that we're talking about X topic. And then we look at the dashboard and discuss and ask questions, and, the leadership and staff are there to, kind of help guide the conversation. Dee Dee, looks like you have something to say.
Well, I've chaired that committee, and I think what happened when you have it in the committee, then you have some board members that have really more information than other board members. And I kind of liked the idea of the whole board getting the same information, especially on student achievement. So I think refining the reports to the board, everybody then has the same information.
Sounds good. Any other comments on SPA? Nope. All right. And just so you know, I'm taking notes, and I'll share these out so that we all know what the outcomes of tonight's conversation was. All right, 917 board term. I guess I'll turn it over to Dee Dee, because you're kind of the one making the request.
Yeah. The term for 917 is on a fiscal year. I mean, their board year runs from July 1st to June 30th. And we have generally assigned a person to 917 on our board assignments from January 1st to December 31st. Well, surprisingly, this past late spring, the board chair of 917, who had been chair several years, she had been diagnosed with cancer and then passed away in early June. So I go to the July 1st meeting and unexpectedly was nominated to be chair of 917. And amazing, I'm now one of the more senior members on the 917 board. And I've been associated with 917 for my entire career in 191. So I reluctantly accepted that challenge. And I would like to fulfill that job, but it really is up to our board to decide. But given how many new members we're going to have on our board, I did have a conversation with you, Abigail, on with this in mind. What this would do if I could finish this one-year term, it would give our board, the 191 board, a chance to at least have an idea or select someone to take over in July, but then spend some time attending meetings between January and June to become familiar with the issues that come to 917. I know I was familiar with 917. I had worked with administrators and staff members, especially with the deaf and hard of hearing class programs. And so I was familiar with 917, and still it took me a while to understand the nuances and the differences in policy and all kinds of things when I became a board member. I think it would help our representative to become more familiar with 917 before they actually become a voting member. Also, I've begun to kind of work with some of the issues in 917 that need attention. And so I'm working on those now. But our board, and I'm comfortable with whatever decision our board makes. If you want to fill the 917 position in our organizational meeting in January, I'm fine with that. But if it works for our board to have someone kind of in training, and then take over in July, change the assignment date to July 1st, that might benefit us, especially with how many new members we're going to have on our school board. So that's my pitch. And I'll open it. I mean, Abigail, you can open it up for discussion or questions.
And I guess the one question that I had that came to mind after we talked, Dee Dee, was, and this is just kind of floating it out to the group too, given that there's a stipend that's associated with this, we need to think about, you know, if a second board member is actually going to be attending, you know, not knowing where we're going to land, but if the will of the board is to have a second person shadowing, does that person receive part of the stipend too?
Well, and I would think that person would be a non-voting board member until the start of July of the next term as well. So, and then, yeah, and I like, you know, if that's something we do, because I just knowing my work with 288, I know that it's important to have, because a lot of times members of the member districts have to report or ask the school board that they sit on to take any kind of board action for any decision that would be something related to the 917. And so like you would almost need to have individual school boards approvals from the member districts in order for 917 to be able to actually then have their board take action or do something. And so with Dee Dee not being on as an official board member, I think it would be important to have a secondary person to be able to bring that back to the board if there's board action that would need to be required during that interim.
My first question is what is the structure? What are the bylaws or the structure at 917 allow for? I
had the same question.
My assumption would be that with another member there, they would not be a voting member, yes. But is it required that we have a sitting member, a sitting 191 board member at the table at 917?
So that I can answer that, the way our board has it structured right now, It does not. It can be either a sitting board member, or it can be a community member. In practice, for as long as I've been on the board and even beyond, probably a couple of years before I landed on the board, it's always been a sitting board member. I know there was one instance where we did have a former board member sitting as a community member on that, on 917. But no, we're not required to have a sitting board member on. It could be a community member.
Okay, so to me, this is fairly straightforward and common. You know, I don't think requires too much overthinking. My opinion would be that Dee Dee remains in the seat till the end of June as the voting member representing the board. We do appoint somebody in January to become the new representative who would shadow Dee Dee until June, until her term as the board chair of 917 ends. They'd be a non-voting member. Any meetings or reports or required presentation of action or anything like that that needs to be given back to us at 191 would be expectation that Dee Dee and the other person would give those. You know, come and speak briefly about that or whatever, or support maybe whatever, work out the nuances of that. But as far as the stipend, I would just suggest just to keep it simple, because otherwise I think you have a payroll issue. Dee Dee maintains the stipend until the end of her June term. Then the stipend rolls over to the board member who is becoming that seat. And then when we do this, it's sort of the person taking the role should probably do it with the understanding that with the expressed interest in probably being in the role more than just the 6 months. So they were probably looking at a year and 6 month appointment, not explicitly, but in intent at least. That would be my thoughts, my 2 cents on it. Keeps it fairly straightforward and simple.
Is the stipend paid by 191 or by 917?
Paid by 191.
That's interesting. I
I
thought
think
it would
the
be
only
paid by
concern
917.
I think the only concern that I have is more structural, because I certainly understand the natural flow of keeping the existing person in the position. We're making an exception to current practice, and we have 3 new board members coming on. And, you know, while we are allowed to have a community member serve on the 917 board, our practice has been to have a sitting board member sitting on the board. So I don't know what kind of message that sends to the new board members with this kind of exception. Maybe it's insignificant. I don't know. But that's just the one thing that I've kind of been mulling over myself.
I hear you, but I don't think it's. I think that's probably they're gonna be getting a lot of messages about a lot of things in the 6 months. And I don't think that's probably going to be too significant. In fact, honestly, I didn't even know this role had a stipend until 3 years in my board service here. So it's somewhat I don't know. I think it just taking a fairly nonsensical, straightforward. Yeah, it's a little unusual in places, but it's because of the circumstances, both the combination of lack of experience and the offset of the calendar situation. So we dodge and deke a little bit and make it work.
Scott, you wanted to say something?
I agree with virtually everything Eric said. I think I'm okay. I don't know if we're deciding tonight or if we're just having a conversation, but I think given everything and given especially, congratulations, Dee Dee. I think I missed that you were the current chair of 917. So
I don't hear
Yeah.
Scott anymore.
lost
I
Scott.
don't know if
Yeah.
it's just me.
No,
I saw Abigail do the ear thing, so I figured. Can you hear me now? All right. anyway, I think I am comfortable moving forward. My main question was whether or not the bylaws required it to be a current board member or I guess a designee. So that was my main question. So given that, I would be comfortable whenever we're ready to make an official decision of allowing Dee Dee to finish out her term. I did have one question though. The 917 terms, I thought I had heard at one point they were 3 years. Is that not the case? Or are they 1 year at a time?
Thank you, Scott, for mentioning that. Yes, they are 3-year terms. So whoever you would assign in July, make sure it's 3 years. I mean, understand that that person from the 917 side is expected to be on for 3 years. Now, of course, if they go through an election and would not win, for whatever reason, of course, you would have to fill that position. But from the 917 perspective, it's a 3-year term.
Okay. I thought we had been told that at some point. Yeah.
I understand I guess the reason for that. It's fairly impractical, but because, we're, whatever. We only have 4-year terms in these seats. So. But all right. I guess we have to work with that. If that's a 917 rule, that's what it is.
Leslie, did you have anything to add? Nope. Okay. All right. Scale. Scott County Association for Leadership and Efficiency. This was originally a board assignment. I think it was originally an assignment 3 or 4 years ago. It has since been assigned to Teresa and executive leadership team. And now, Teresa, you're believing that it should be both a board assignment as well as executive leadership.
So yes, so there's a little bit more background information I wanted to share too. So it was Director Dan Luth who was appointed to Scale in 2018, and Dee Dee Courier was the alternate. And then the board met on January 10th, 2019 in a workshop to discuss the committee structure and assignments. And it was at that time that the superintendent would designate a staff member. And Superintendent Omarosa appointed Stephanie White, and in turn, Jennifer Mittendorf would attend when Stephanie White, our Director of Student Support Services, could not attend. So Stephanie did meet with me to discuss the scale meetings. And also at the same time, City of Savage Mayor Janet Williams also approached me, and they both had the same question. So the Scott County superintendents all attend. It's not their designee, unless for some reason they have a conflict, but the superintendents attend and they each have a board rep with them. And so at that time, Brian Gersich and I decided we could attend the scale meetings because they are in conflict with the AMSD Board of Directors. So their meetings are scheduled on the second Friday of each month from 7:30 to 9 a.m. I have included a calendar, meeting agenda and calendar for 2020. The next meeting is scheduled December 11th. And a lot of information available if you wanted to know about the organization can be found on their website. It includes all the Scott County districts, all the cities, tribal community and regional entities, transit entities, townships. And so that's what the request is, that we seem to be the only one not having, well, now we do have superintendent, but we don't have a board rep. So I don't know if there's other information that you want to share.
I've had multiple conversations with Mayor Williams over the last couple of years, and she really has been a strong advocate for 191 being at the table. For a while we hadn't been, and it's important to have the right level of representation. And I think, Teresa, you outlined it beautifully, that, you know, the superintendent, assistant superintendent, one of those two people attends. The other school districts do have board members attending, and if we're not at the table, we're not being heard. And I think we know that, you know, we have work across the whole district in terms of being heard, whether we're talking Scott County or Dakota County. So that's why we're bringing it forward, just as a, you know, a consideration. Do we want to add this as a board assignment in January?
And I also agenda from last month to give you an idea of topics they talk about. They always have a presentation on a topic of particular interest to all the Scott County entities. So last Friday, it was the county building project and their legislative priorities, review and approval. And then they always have an open forum. The next meeting, the agenda will be community feedback to the mental health needs, especially in a time of COVID. And also to present the legislative priorities they have determined to the legislators.
So comments, board members.
Teresa, how often did you say they meet? Is it every month or?
Yes, every month, second Friday, 7:30 to 9 a.m. So I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, pre-COVID, there's a breakfast. And I think as part of a member, you're responsible. So there is a little responsibility. I think, do we buy the beverage?
We either brought, I think we brought the pastries or donuts, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, so now we're not doing that. So that's why I don't really know. And it wasn't my time when we started pre-COVID. It wasn't our turn. So.
I guess if all the other districts are having representation, it would make sense for us to also be at the table for those meetings.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
I do too.
Can we assign Dee Dee to the job?
Yeah.
There we go.
Just kidding.
You're not getting out, Dee Dee.
Listen,
Is that in the bylaws? Former board members get assigned?
It is now.
All right, so good one, Eric. All right, so I think we're good with all of our school and school board assignments. We'll move next to the board legislative, the proposed board legislative platform. Turning it over to the legislative committee, and I believe what we'll want to do after tonight's discussion, Teresa, is make sure to add this. Depending on the discussion, it'll have to be formally approved. But I'll turn it over to the legislative committee.
So what was shared, so the legislative committee just met on Monday. The platform document that was shared with the background papers is the one that was created last year. What we talked about on Monday was reviewing what the platform ends up being for AMSD and MSBA, and then looking at those two and kind of prioritizing which of those things do we feel are most relevant or impactful for 191, and that would be our kind of our platform for next year. So I guess, I mean, I'm not sure what maybe we can get some initial thoughts on.
Well, the other thing I would mention, Scott,
Yeah.
we talked about briefly was, because this was a conversation we had a year or two ago when we first did an agenda, is just that do we want to keep it to 3 or 4 points or expand? Yeah, AMSD and MSBA. Now, both of them are typically run closer to 10. Some of those later points kind of get lumped into a list at the end with the primary ones being bulleted up front. But you know, we made a conscious decision the first time around to keep it to a limited set. Tends to be my opinion, but I think it's open for discussion and see what you feel about it.
Yeah, and the next AMSD and MSBA's platforms aren't going to come out until next month, so we won't be actually able to review or prioritize what we would be identifying as ours probably till our next legislative committee meeting.
And when is the next legislative committee meeting? Do we know?
We just met on Monday, so it probably would be the mid-December. I'd have to look at the calendar to see the exact date.
So in terms of meeting with our elected officials, what has the legislative committee discussed in terms of our platform and those meetings?
We talked about, this is another thing we talked about on Monday, reaching out to the representatives that were elected or re-elected and inviting them to an upcoming meeting. We were thinking potentially, since it's all on Zoom, we could have all of them come to one meeting rather than, I think last time we mostly had one person come each month. Which was good in a lot of ways, but also by the time we got to meet with some of them, the legislative session was nearly over. So I think if we felt if we meet with all of them earlier in the session, it might have more impact as far as making them aware of what we see as our biggest needs and priorities. And ultimately, they're all hearing that also ensures they're all hearing kind of the same thing from us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say we want to try to meet with them before the session begins because their downtime is between now and then. And,
right.
Whether it's the legislative committee or it's a special Zoom meeting with the full board led by the legislative committee with elected officials,
mm-hmm.
Leaving that up to the committee to figure out, but and I think that was the only reason why I was asking about getting our platform approved. But I think we probably could still have that conversation with our re-elected or newly elected officials independently of that, because I think, funding is clearly what we're talking about.
Right. And it's a funding year, so.
It's a funding year, yeah. I think
so just to share the dates. So our legislative committee meeting is December 21st, and both MSBA and AMSD report that they'll have their platforms done by December 4th. To give you a timeline.
Had you also discussed anything that wasn't related to funding, like policy? We had talked about, I know over this past year, we've talked about how, some of the state mandates kind of tie our hands in terms of, for example, retaining teachers of staff of color, in terms of, there are any number of policy items that could also be lobbied for. It's your recommendation that we're only thinking about funding?
I don't know about only, but I think that'll be the biggest, right?
I suspect the conversations we've had widely range and often encompass more than just funding. Definitely encompass more than funding.
Sure.
When we have peer, conversations with the representatives, and now with the new crop coming through, we have even more that have either immediate or a fairly tight connection to education. So those will probably be beneficial conversations. So yeah, we talk about it, and we also talk about, it's often an opportunity for them to bring up things that their constituents of concern and brought to them of concern, and that usually falls in the ambassador bucket because we're killing myths often is what we're doing, and clarifying facts. So yeah, but no, we definitely. I don't, and we talked a little bit about this Monday night too, part of the reason I think even if we don't have everybody come on a planned special one evening thing, we're definitely going to extend invitations to multiple. And if Jamie says, look, I can get both Jess Hansen and Lindsay Port on this one night, we'll be like, all right, bring them both. Let's do it. That's great. They know each other. They're sitting on the same side of the aisle. There's not going to be any kind of fireworks. We're going to have a beneficial conversation. So let's do it.
So I like the idea of keeping it short. I think, limiting our goals to, 3 or 4 goals. And I liked, I know that, probably what we have isn't going to change a whole lot between now and when MSBA and AMSD come out with theirs. I do think, secondarily, we should be talking about those policy items, whether it's formally part of the platform or knowing that policy is going to change from year to year. What is it that we as a board believe are the top policy concerns that, we want to advocate for? Because I think, in terms of the conversations that I've had with community members, they appreciate knowing that we're not just lobbying for more funding. They want to hear, are there things, like some of the special education mandates, in terms of the time invested in paperwork versus actually with students, that some of those changes have been implemented. And actually, the research, at least that led up to that change, suggested that there was a financial benefit to that in addition to a learning benefit for the students. So just championing the policy too.
Good point.
Something that just came to mind that we didn't discuss at the legislative committee would be in terms of, it crossed into ambassadors too, but I know with it being a budget year as well, there'll be, MASA Day on the Hill, there'll be school board member day on the Hill, and to figure out how we can be more active in that, I think would be something that I'm only on the legislative committee in Jen's shoes through December, but I would advocate for that piece too.
Well, and I know that, when I've talked with members of the chamber, we've appreciated that what a strong statement it would make if the chamber and the school board showed up together on the Hill, showing really that we really are together as a community and supportive of each other. So so you're looking basically for general feedback, Scott, on this initial document, knowing that there might be tweaks to
it. Yeah, I guess. I think we've all seen this document before, but if there are any initial thoughts that people have as we start that, even before we get the MSBA and AMSD priorities, I think all of us have a pretty good handle on what our priorities are already. So, looking at what we had created a couple, last year, do those priorities still align? Are there other things that you want to make sure that we're considering? Some of the policies you just mentioned, perhaps, that we would maybe want to consider when we're thinking about what our priorities are going to be for that committee for next year.
Dee Dee, I think, so Leslie, Scott, and Eric are all on the legislative committee, so it's you and me, Dee Dee.
Well, I think they've nailed it, but that cross subsidy that appeared in the 2019, if we could get that handled, I'll tell you that would sure help. Because that takes away from the general fund. I wish that problem would get people's attention, and it doesn't. I don't know, it doesn't get the politicians' attention.
Yeah, I agree, Dee Dee. I think you guys have done a great job. I think,
Yeah.
It's not, there's not been a lot of change, and so in the last couple of years, and so it's not surprising that our platform doesn't really need to change. I think just updating some of the details at the bottom is really, I mean, obviously the only thing. And just, considering when MSBA and AMSD and probably MASA is going to come out with their platform too, Teresa, look for policy suggestions, less formally that we could discuss. And, certainly we could do that in a workshop with legislative committee leading it. What policy items are we interested in?
Also related to the cross subsidy, though, some of that is on the federal level. And so it'd be engaging, Representative Angie Craig and any of our other Minnesota officials out on the federal level to be initiating some of that change. Because I think it was supposed to be 40% that the federal government was supposed to be supporting, and they're nowhere near that.
And never have been. Never.
Dr. Currier and I participated in the AMSD breakout sessions to give feedback on their draft legislative platform, and there were several policy stipulations, requests. So I think you'll see some that the committee can actually discuss and whittle down to possibly to the 191 legislative platform based on our interests and needs.
Awesome. Anything else before we move on?
Not for me.
All right. And then second to the last item really was, so this is the board self-evaluation report. We conducted an online survey as individuals answering the MSBA survey, and this report that's in Board Book, it reflects our responses as a group and compares our responses this year to our responses last year, which I thought was really interesting. And I appreciate at least starting to have, 2 years of information to look at and compare. So if we can get that displayed. All right. So, don't want to belabor it or, as Eric says, overthink it. What did everybody notice in the information and the comparison year over year that jumped out at you?
It's a good sign there's more green in 2020 than there was in 2019 on the bar charts. Okay, we're heading in the right direction. Except for that first one, but the rest of them, it's more green now than it was before.
It will be interesting for you as a board if you do it next year, given you will have so many new board members, what it'll look like. Because I think we had some maturity in working together. So it'll be interesting if you do it next year, what the pattern will look like. But even on that first one, the green and the blue is still more than it was in 2019, even though the green was a little smaller. So.
Well, and I think it's interesting too that we're, right now at this moment in time, we're all kind of evaluating ourselves similarly.
Yeah.
We're kind of on the same page in terms of where we are. Accountability was interesting because that was, one of the elements that, there was a change. And that's holding the school district accountable. Thank you. Accountable for meeting student learning expectations. I thought that was, that we're obviously doing better this year, in our opinions, than we were last year.
And Abigail, given the complexity that we're in with the pandemic, I mean, I found that as well unique, that it turned out so nicely.
Do we know roughly how many questions went into the aggregate of these? I don't, unless you happen to have seen it, I'm expecting the answer.
Not off the top of my head, no.
I can't remember how many questions were in this whole thing. There's quite a few.
I want to say it was like 50 maybe, but I could certainly ask.
Might even been more than that, to be honest. You mean 50 overall?
Mm-hmm.
So that way, if that holds true, 3, 4, 5, there's roughly 10 questions per. What I'm trying to point at is, the more you have, the more you get a smoothed out average. I think we had this conversation. I'm very happy to see the amount of don't know black substantially declined. That's good. That and it will be interesting as we do this again, exercise again next year, with the amount of new members that we have.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if we jump back up on that black a little bit, but maybe it might be a good lesson to remind ourselves to preface that a little, as it'll be their first round. But then again, maybe don't know is a good lesson for us also.
Right.
Well, and I think also now that this is kind of part of our, regular cycle and our regular stride, those of us who will remain on the board, being mindful that this is, how we are going to evaluate ourselves, and being mindful of that through the year to make sure, are we really giving the new board members the information that they need so that they don't say, I don't know. And I know that the first year is tough, and there are going to be I don't knows.
Yeah.
But are we doing what we need to? Is there anything else that we need to consider in order to help with that learning curve? I think we're doing a really good job. We do a really good job with new board members in terms of the onboarding process, but there's always room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
The answers may be different though, too, just thinking about what we did in 1 year as new school board members. I'm thinking of Scott, Jen, and I, with the budget cuts, a new superintendent, closing 3 schools, and a levy referendum. I mean, there's a lot we wouldn't know in some of these buckets because there's no time for us to spend on them, but if we're in a more stabilized manner, maybe the answers may be different because we won't be addressing some, fires.
Mhm.
No, that's a good point, Leslie. It was a highly unusual year. Any other comments that folks want to make?
I just found Jamie's email with the survey with 71 questions.
71. All right. Thank you. It gets better. All right. And then the last item I just wanted to bring forward because I didn't want to make assumptions. We had a request to consider taking breaks during some of our longer virtual meetings because it's a long time to be staring at a screen and sitting in one place. So I just wanted to put it out there, you know, are we open to doing that? And any suggestions for how that might happen?
I enthusiastically support that. I don't know who made the request, but thank you.
Yeah, I don't know.
I did.
I don't have an issue with it. I think we have some natural demarcation points in our agenda, so maybe.
Yeah, I was
just
thinking
pick
between
those.
education and business or something, and then, you know, and then if we have that workshop, it's nice having that break then too. But depending on how long the education piece, we may need to take a break in the middle of that, but
Right. I mean, sometimes it's 20 minutes and sometimes it's an hour and a half. So,
or 2.5 hours.
right. If it's 20 minutes, I don't need a break before we go on to the next session. But if it's an hour and a half or 2 hours, it might be good. That would be the time to have a break, I think.
Yeah.
So we can kind of leave it up to the chair to announce breaks and, you know, obviously in a virtual world, if, you know, we could certainly raise the question too, you know.
I will point out I was impressed when we came back, like it was just last night. Aaron had quickly whipped up that slide that was and had the little note that we were
The intermission slide. Yeah, that was good.
Well, yeah, maybe something like that. You know, a Jeopardy themed music thing or something.
We're in
going
recess.
in the background for us, Aaron. Well,
We all went to recess.
yeah.
I like recess. I was thinking of the intermission videos that play in drive-in theaters, you know, so like, you know, 5 minutes to showtime.
Hey, you could use it an opportunity to, Aaron, you can run out, take 20 pictures of our various playgrounds around the district, and then, you know, do a slideshow of we're at recess at the different playgrounds.
Awesome. All right. Well, good. I didn't want to just we'd gotten the request before our last meeting, and I just wanted to run that by you guys first. I figured we'd be fine with it, but just wanted to do that. So good. So the chair will figure it out unless somebody mentions it first. And with that, I believe we are finished. Thank you, everybody. This has been a really productive conversation. Again, I will draw up notes and check in with Teresa and make sure that our notes compare. And we'll post that back to Board Book and share it out with you guys so you can see that. Okay. With that,
Thank you.
Aaron, for being with us.
Good
And
night.
thank you, everybody. Have a good night.